Hello everybody, and once again it's time for another astrology classroom episode. And this last July I actually held a poll to see what you guys wanted to talk about next, and I made a list of about a good handful of topics to talk about, and it looks like we wanted to talk about going into a overview of the planets in astrology, or let's just say primary celestial bodies, because we talk about the moon and the sun as well. And then in another video I'm going to be talking about fate versus free will, transits versus the natal chart. And we got a lot of planets to go through in a short period, plus again 2 luminaries, the sun and the moon, so stay tuned. It's going to be a bit of a brisk overview, but that's kind of important, to make sure that we don't get so hung up in, overthinking astrology either, because astrology is a tool. Why is it 2 astrologers or even 5 astrologers can look at the same aspect and come up with different predictions? Well, because those astrologers are also, if they're worth their salt, are also getting spiritually in tune with their intuition, as opposed to just working with the whole left brain mechanics of astrology. When you look at a planet or a luminary, it can be really easy to get lost in the hodgepodge of associations of those planets. If we're talking about the planet Mars, for instance, are we talking about passion, lust? Are we talking about a career in the military? Are we talking about anger? What are we talking about? And this can always be a tough spot, I've noticed, for people, whether they are just starting out in astrology or they're maybe getting a little bit lost in trying to, say, do their own horoscope. And it's a lot like the tarot. Each tarot card has a ton of symbology in it and a ton of associations with each card, but the gift is being able to know the card through and through and not have to assume that all definitions all mean the same thing all the time. Your intuition, your skill, your ability to tap in to what you're viewing is going to give you the right answer of all of those associations, not just over-associate, okay? Because we don't want to make a mistake when we're doing a prediction. Neptune is the ruler of dreams, creativity. It's the higher octave of the planet Mercury. But it can also rule addictions, as well as mental illness. And in the hands of the wrong reader, or the wrong reading, a person may not necessarily do that correctly. They may jump to a conclusion they should not. So it's important to know all of these things, but also make sure that you are answering a question when you're doing it, and make sure that you are allowing your intuition to guide you to which interpretation is correct for what you're looking at. Let's get started with the sun. What's going on with the sun? By the way, before I jump out of the sun, a lot of this is all going to be about just the planets themselves, what they do, and what they serve in astrology, okay? I'm not going to be talking about houses and house rulers and signs, because I already covered that in a 2-part video in this series, so you can check that out. But I want to make sure that we allow for this to come piecemeal, because I find that is a better way to learn, and it's an easier way to absorb the content. Now we're going to talk about the sun. And the sun is often classified as a luminary. It's not a planet. Some people will call it a planet, but we know it's not a planet. The sun in your chart represents you. It is a huge portion of you and your identity, both wrapped up in terms of, your higher superego and your ego, the character you play in this lifetime on Earth. The sun in a person's astrology chart can talk a lot about their modus operandi, what they want to get out of life, their mission in life, and what their source of power is, where they derive their happiness, how they may express themselves, and what exactly is powering this person, where does this person's power come from, and how do they share that power and that personality with the world. So if we're looking at, say, a person's chart, in addition to, say, looking at, a sun in Aries or a sun in Taurus, we might also want to take a look and see what house it's in. A person with a sun in the 11th house is going to get their power from their friendships. It's going to get their power from socialization, from their tribe, feeling like they're a part of a community, being fairly extroverted and very sociable as well. This could be somebody who really is very warm and open and somebody who is incredibly expressive. If the sun were, say, in the 4th house, this would be somebody who derives their power from a sense of family. They work in closer, tighter units, maybe smaller teams. Smaller groups and smaller communities are better for them. They are incredibly nurturing. They are also incredibly structured, well organized, and it all depends, again, on what's aspecting the sun. But you'll learn about that person's self-expression through not just the sign, but the house. A sun in Virgo with the sun in the 11th house is very different than a sun in Virgo with the sun in the 8th house. It's an important distinction to learn how to make when you're studying astrology, or else you may just end up doing a bit too much pop culture astrology and not looking into the real deal. The moon in a person's astrology chart represents a person's emotional needs, but also at the same time what they're very sensitive to, what they need to feel loved, the love language they wish to receive from the world. And when we talk about the love language they wish to receive, this is how you love this person. You also find out what they love, what they live for, and what they are trying to give themselves. The moon can also indicate what this person's sensitivities are. Not necessarily sensitivities in a way that talks about, frailties, but sensitivities of what their awareness is, where they might get more passionate, and what they get emotionally invested in. A person with a moon in the 2nd house is emotionally invested in, say, their material security. Their value system, their self-image can sometimes get maybe a bit more preoccupied with their sense of achievement and accomplishment in the world. They could be a very driven person. However, again, if it's well aspected, that can serve them very, very well and also allow them to give that and share that with other people. If the moon is not well aspected, it could indicate some challenges in that person's chart where maybe, again, they become a bit too crazed or a bit too status or prominence oriented, and it could be alienating. A moon in a person's 6th house says a lot of their sense of self-satisfaction, their emotional security, or their sensitivities are wrapped up in the service they give to others, but also their physical body, how healthy it is, maybe their image. So you can look at a person's moon and see how that plays out. You might also see in a love reading, if a person's asking about love and you find out a person's moon is in their 9th house, okay, the higher education, government, legal proceedings, travel, and culture, they like to feel that love. They want to feel love, or they do feel love coming through adventures, okay? Knocking down walls, exploring new things with their partner. They also derive a lot from their spiritual life and academic practices. They are definitely more interested in feeding the heart through the mind and the spirit as opposed to through the body or perhaps the words. So that could be something that would be very insightful to somebody who wants to know more about their partner. We go into our discussion of the planets themselves, okay? And we always start off with Mercury, the planet of communication, intelligence, all right? This can sometimes talk about a person's ability to memorize things, their memory. We also talk about Mercury as how fast and efficient and productive a person is, okay? Because Mercury does rule haste and speed. You can look at a person's communication style when it comes to how they interact with the world, how they deliver messages, and you can find out what environments they are most productive in. Okay, a person with Mercury in the 1st house may actually be better working alone or in very small groups. They may actually find that they are most productive when they are not having to deal with teams and groups and units and things like that. And they do often speak their minds, and though they may have their own language, everyone has to learn. A person with, say, Mercury in the 7th house is better at talking to people in one-on-one situations. This is somebody who prefers to also have a lot of pacts and promises and promises that they keep and that they want to have. A lot of people with Mercury in the 7th house, everything is as good as a blood vow to them. But they do also uphold their promises, as long as, again, that Mercury is well aspected. Mercury, again, we can also look at memory and maybe even a person's sociability. A person with a well aspected Mercury is going to be, incredibly intelligent and perhaps even a savant or a genius of the house that it occupies. A person with Mercury in, say, the 4th house could be, you know, great when it comes to handling things like raising children, when it comes to raising a family or handling household economics, saving for the future, investment planning. Somebody with Mercury in the 10th house could be quite smart when it comes to things like promotion, marketing. They could be very, very quick when it comes to being able to rise through any kind of corporate or business ladder that they are working through. And we also see that people with Mercury in the 12th house tend to be very, very good at remembering everything. The past, the privacy, and the hidden zone. With Mercury in the 12th house, people are a bit more soft-spoken. And sometimes the 12th house occupied by Mercury can show where a person doesn't speak up as fast as they could, but it does also lend its strength to people who are, again, very, very independent, somebody who is probably, again, better at working alone, and somebody who has a steel trap of a memory, something to pay attention to. Venus is a planet of love and affection, attraction, as well as luck, and to some degree money and charisma. And when we have Venus in a person's chart, we can see how a person actually brings that out. How does this person exude all of this? If Venus is in a person's, say, 8th house, this could be a very vivacious and very sensual person. You know, we have the firecracker, you know, somebody who's a little bit, you know, who likes to get a, flirt with a little bit of eroticism with everything that they do, with everyone that they meet. And it doesn't necessarily mean that this person is loose or of ill repute. This could just be a way that they like to actually establish a rapport or a connection, a very flirtatious way of, creating a bond. Venus is also a planet that talks about where we might actually find another love language, but how this person expresses their love. Okay, if the moon is the love language we want to receive, Venus is the love language we give. Okay, so if a person has Venus in, say, house 10, they show their love by lifting somebody up. Acts of service, gift giving, promoting, helping somebody out, lifting them up. Venus in maybe the 4th house, however, could be more of a nurturing, less task-oriented type of affection. Somebody who's willing to, again, nurture by creating a strong environment, work on quality time spent. There could be actually focus on support by creating an ideal environment for their loved one to thrive in. Venus can be a good indicator for people who are interested in business as well, where they may be successful in business. When we look for, say, a person who wants to go into business for themselves, for myself, I always look at where is Venus and where is Jupiter in a person's astrology chart. I like to see either Venus or Jupiter occupying or ruling houses 4, 8, or 12. And that can be an interesting sort of play on how things work out in a person's chart. You may have another way of doing things. But Venus is also the way we attract our business, how we actually come out to the world and again give our love. Venus itself can also be a sign of how a person is going to reward people or perhaps show affection and loyalty for people in their space. A lot of the times when it comes to Venus, you see people, will actually lean on their Venus in order to encourage somebody, where they give their positive reinforcement. Do they do it quietly? Are they more exuberant about it? I've got Venus in my 10th house. I'm very, very gregarious and loud when it comes to things like thank yous. I do buy people gifts. I like to buy people's dinners and all kinds of things like that. It can get expensive, so you've got to be careful if you've got Venus in either houses 10 or 2. You can be generous, but you may be careless, and I've been known to do that. So there's a lot of interesting things you can look at. There's more than just love when it comes to that planet. Mars, the planet of action, energy, passion, conviction, and yes, to a degree, war and battle, is a very complicated planet when it comes to our charts. Some astrologers will classify it as a malefic, or a planet that is negative, or brings ill fortune, or harsh fortune. I do not. I find that limiting, and I don't do that. I find that Mars can actually be an asset for people more than it is a liability. Mars talks about what we are turned on by. It's another romantic, but more of a sexual planet or an intimate planet in that respect. And Mars can also talk about how we fight our battles and how we go about solving problems, how we defend ourselves, how we fix things that are broken that need to be fixed in our lives. A well-aspected Mars can indicate somebody who is not only a fast problem solver, but somebody who is assertive and somebody who is actually good at taking care of other people. A poorly aspected Mars can indicate a person who may not necessarily be good at fighting their own battles, or perhaps somebody who does not step up to the plate when it is their time to actually meet the challenge at hand. Mars can sometimes bring up issues about what this person does when they are angry, and you can learn a little bit about that. You know, some people get angry and they give you the silent treatment, you know, and they go into their shell, and you see that a lot in Mars in the 12th house people. Sometimes you see people get really, really angry and a little bit explosive. They got a bit of a temper, and they're not afraid to do it in front of other people. And sometimes you can see that with Mars in the 1st house or Mars in the 7th house. Some people get angry, but they do it in a way that's not as fiery. You tend to have a cold Mars, is how I like to talk about it, in houses 4 and 10. These are people that are a little bit more like strategists, you know. These are people that solve their problems right out of the book of Lao Tzu. And you might actually find that, you know, if you learn how a person solves their problems, or what gets on their bad side, or what they will do to solve a problem, you can actually find out if this is a way we can actually help this person, either to solve the problem of, you know, the way they're going to do it, if it's right, or perhaps find a better way if it's wrong. You can find with Mars as well what a person's sense of honor is, what their code of honor is, what they believe is most important. Passion, well, we don't have passion unless we're passionate about something, and Mars can show us that something. Mars and the Sun, looking at the sign it's in and the houses they occupy, can tell you a lot about what a person really makes a big deal out of. And you don't want to tick off that Mars by offending that house or that sign, you know, or maybe you can even find out about yourself. When are you getting ticked off? And maybe it has something to do with that. Mars can also be a planet that rules our finances, especially when it comes to labor, physical labor, or hours worked. Mars can actually bring financial gain through labor and through hard work and through long hours. And a person's availability to do that, or perhaps maybe their 10th house could be ruled by Mars, either formally, you know, with Aries, or classically Aries and or Scorpio. You may find that this is a person who is going to be working a lot. This is somebody who has the drive and the energy and the physical capacity to, you know, again, stay up and burn the candle at both ends. They just happen to have a bigger candle. This is actually something that could be, you know, good for the person or bad. Again, if it's a negatively aspected Mars or a challenged Mars or something like that, there could be a bit of an issue where this person might be overdoing it, maybe working harder, not smarter. However, if it's a well-aspected Mars, this person could actually be a really strong achiever, especially in the later stages of, let's say, young adulthood, especially between the early 30s and about the early 40s. You may find that somebody is able to really kind of put that drive to good use and make a huge splash. Jupiter is the planet of luck, expansion, harmony, education, wealth, and prominence. And Jupiter is all about where a person is going to be sort of their most successful, where they're going to derive their most pleasure from, and also where they're going to have a lot of fun, or where they're going to get most of their most profitable work done in this life. It can talk a lot about, you know, maybe this person's going to be doing a lot of traveling. Okay, maybe it's domestic travel with Jupiter in the 3rd house. They could actually be also fairly locally famous with Jupiter in the 3rd house, you know, a regional celebrity. Or perhaps Jupiter's in the 9th house and they actually make a lot of friends and a lot of strong business connections abroad. Jupiter can also talk about their financial gains. It's one of the planets I look for to see what a person could do for a living. I do want to caveat right now, a lot of people will ask in readings, you know, what's my purpose? Your purpose might not be ruled by Jupiter. Our life purpose isn't always something we're going to get paid for. Now, if you just want to know what your career is, own it. If you're passionate about just making money, own it. And look for Jupiter. It's one of the places you can go. Jupiter in a person's chart can tell you, again, where a person's going to be making their money, and the house that Jupiter rules can tell you a little bit more about how they could go about doing it. Again, to give an example from my own chart, Jupiter is in my 4th house of home. This is all happening from home. And Jupiter rules my 3rd house of communications. Guess what? It's on the internet. So there is a way, again, do a lot of public speaking, or on video recording. The 3rd house rules technology as well, to a certain degree. 3rd house and the 11th house both rule technology. And so there's a lot that you can play around with here to kind of, suss out what, what's going to happen or what this person can do. Jupiter can also indicate, what a person is going to actually work on fixing or creating prosperity and abundance around in their space. If Jupiter is in the 4th house, a person may actually be working on creating the perfect kingdom, the perfect castle. If Jupiter is in, say, the 11th house, they may be working on creating the perfect social circle. They could be working on creating the perfect, maybe the perfect new type of career, new type of corporation. They could be an innovative CEO. When we look at, say, maybe Jupiter in the 10th house of career, they could be doing it in politics or in law with the 9th house. It's all a rich tapestry. Again, your exploration will take you further. You've got to do your homework. Saturn is one of the 2 planets people are most afraid of. Saturn and Pluto get the bad rep. Those are the ones that are also considered malefics. I don't do that. I don't do malefics versus... I don't believe there's some things that are all good and versus all bad. And with Saturn in our chart, Saturn is, again, it's the disciplinarian. It does represent challenges, hurdles, obstacles, and mountains to climb. But it can also show up and talk to us a lot about what we're going to be needing to learn a lesson about, what is cultivated, and what we can do to overcome that challenge. And what Saturn rules in your chart can also tell you what the source of those problems is coming from, and what do you need to do. If a person has Saturn in the 2nd house of values, income, and finances, and Saturn rules a person's 11th house of friendships and social networking, they're going through a lesson of learning how to perhaps, again, maybe cultivate a bit more financial literacy, financial sense, and to, gaining a sense of financial security. But the problem comes from what Saturn rules. They have to know how to be choosier with their friends. If Saturn rules a person's, 7th house of partnerships and marriage, in close one-on-one relationships, it can indicate that they're going to need to unlearn a lot of challenges or a lot of lessons they think they know about love, and unlearn a lot of expectations they've developed about love and close one-on-one relationships based on what house the Saturn is in. It rules. If Saturn rules the 7th house, then there's a good chance that they learned all they want from a relationship, from an early relationship in life, that they need to unlearn. If Saturn rules the 10th house, they could have learned a lot of it from, maybe other people, role models, a father figure. If Saturn rules the 9th house, they could have picked something up in school, or perhaps even needing to unlearn some traditions, unlearn some things forced upon them by a religious institution or a cultural institution. It's not necessarily a bad planet. Saturn is only harsh when we decide we don't want to work hard. When we sit and cry and whine about him and we say, Saturn's being such a dick to me, we're asking for more punishment. Saturn is kind of like the jerk professor. He is the Snape of the zodiac. He's honestly, there to help us in our own good. He's not Mr. Congenial. And at the end of the day, he rewards hard work, and it's okay to go ask what you're not getting. It's okay to explore. It's okay to do your homework. It's okay to take office hours. With Saturn, if you're willing to put the work in, the energy supports getting it done. Uranus is the planet of revelation, revolution, alteration, rebellion, chaos, and just a bit of pandemonium. Uranus is a hard planet for astrologers to look at and make predictions from, because where it comes from, or what is happening with Uranus, again, is random by nature. We could say something is doing a 180, flipping on its head, or it's all, again, a bunch of hodgepodge chaos, But Uranus is just not going to necessarily give us all the answers right away. Uranus can rule where a person is going to be most prone to rebelling in their astrology chart, where they're going to be making the innovations, where they're going to be making the changes to what was there before. If a person has Uranus as the ruler of their 6th house of health and service to others, they may be revolutionizing, either in a big or small way, how things work in those areas wherever they go. Whether it's revolutionizing how they handle their own physical health when it comes to diets, or maybe actually, maybe working a lot with, let's just say, less conventional medical practices, alternative medicines themselves, supplementing conventional medicine with, new cutting-edge techniques, or perhaps actually even revolutionizing every office or every, work building they go into, because as soon as they show up, everything is just dramatically altered. Policies change, whatever's going on there. Where Uranus is in a person's astrology chart can also indicate how a person's going to handle that part of their chart, and where they may actually be, sent to revolutionize, that area of their chart away from what has come before in their family or in their generation past, or even in a past life. Neptune is the planet of genius and fantasy. It is the planet of dreams, it's the planet of epiphany. It is also considered one of the higher spiritual connective planets. It's one of the 3 key psychic planets that I talked about in the paranormal and, psychic abilities and, spiritual abilities video that I did a little while ago. Now, Neptune is a tricky one, though, because Neptune is incredibly fluid. Neptune can rule genius, again, art, creativity, as well as a bit of love and a bit of spiritual passion and in connectivity and empathy. But it can also rule habits, addictive tendencies, and sometimes it can also impact our mental health. Having Neptune in your chart, like everyone does, doesn't necessarily mean that it's hitting all of those points at once in that area. Again, you have to check and see, is that Neptune well aspected? What's going on with it? Okay? Neptune is also a very neutral planet. It is just as good in bad direct as it is good in bad retrograde. So there's always a chance that, things could be a little bit different for all involved. Now, with Neptune, we tend to see where a person is most sensitive, okay, and in a sense where they could be easily bruised, but we also again see where somebody is actually a master, a natural-born prodigy when it comes to that area and that skill. This could actually be a way that a person works their way up to the top in life, but also at the same time where they may have some trouble coping. Neptune can also be a deceiver as well as an enticer. A lot of the times people who have Neptune in a certain part of their chart may need to take caution where they could actually be tricked or deceived by individuals that are involved in those activities. Neptune in the 2nd house could be business. Neptune in the 5th house could be love, or perhaps even how we communicate or relate with our children. Neptune in the 4th house, family. Neptune, however, can also be the truth teller. If Neptune is retrograde in a person's chart, this person pretty much can't be lied to there. Okay, and this person may also have some trouble with that, though, because, we do live in a world where sometimes we wish people would just let things go. Neptune is actually a planet that can talk about where a person's self-esteem, is at its weakest, and give some really strong insights into what's going on there and what could have actually happened to make that happen. But again, also talk about where this person is, again, a prodigy, an artist, a genius, and what they're also in charge of. And a lot of the times people are masters of the very thing that they actually have the hardest time with. When it comes to Pluto, again, it's the other malefic in our astrology charts. Pluto is a complicated planet because it's seen as very dark, and to a certain degree it is very dark. But dark does not mean evil, and light does not mean good. Okay? We can have just as many problems with a light planet, or a planet that we see as light, as we could with a dark one. Pluto is the ruler of a person's dark side. To a certain degree, it can talk a bit about our shadow, how severe and austere we can be. Like Mars, it can give indication to problem solving, how we actually handle our problems, how we end things, how we complete tasks. Pluto can also talk about power. It can talk about how we handle ourselves. Are we good authority figures? When it comes to secrets, Pluto is also, again, a ruler of secrets, the other psychic planet. But Pluto is all about, again, finding out secrets and keeping them, or not. A poorly aspected Pluto can indicate somebody who might not be trustworthy, somebody you could not expect to hold a secret very well. A Pluto that's well aspected could be somebody who not only is an expert in finding out secrets, but knows a lot more than everyone gives them credit for. Pluto is also a planet that can talk about, again, the shadow side of things. What somebody does in secret, how mysterious, how private, who's keeping a lot of secrets. A person with Pluto in, say, the 8th house may actually have a lot of secrets in the way, they express themselves through sharing their resources. They may stow and stash a lot of money. They may have secret investments in different places for their own financial security. They may have, yes, some very secret, intimate fantasies. Pluto rules, sex depending on if it rules that house in your chart, so it could be that. But there's a way that it's expressed. And it has to do through, again, what's going on behind closed doors. Well aspected, treated nicely, this Pluto can actually serve this person incredibly well. It means that they might take no crap from anybody, that they are able to overcome any challenge or obstacle, and they can glide through even the most, scary or dicey situations with ease. However, if it's poorly aspected, it may actually indicate a person who is not able to overcome things in an expedient fashion. It may indicate a person who does not use power well when it is given to them, whether they advocate the throne that they should be sitting in, or they, give their power away or abuse it. That can all be said in how harmonious things are going when it comes to aspects and connections it's making in the astrology chart. How a person handles power and transition will show up with this planet. So, there goes the brisk, but I hope dense enough to serve you well overview of the planets and luminaries of astrology. Remember, aspects do matter, houses do matter, and signs do matter. This will give you a lot of insight not only into a person's natal chart, but also actually help you to understand just a little bit more about how you can formulate your own predictions for predictive horoscopes and astrology.